Hello and welcome to Realpolitik. This is Stanley Johnny, the Hindu's International Affairs Editor. The Ukraine conflict has witnessed dramatic developments in recent weeks. US President Donald Trump has brought in a 180-degree shift in the US policy towards the war. Disagreements between Kyiv and Washington on how to end the war led to an unprecedented public spat between Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Trump in the Oval Office. After which, the United States paused all military aid for the war-torn European country. Within a day, Zelenskyy regretted the spat, announced Kyiv's readiness to declare a partial truce and work with Mr. Trump to achieve lasting peace. On March 11th, after talks with US officials in Jeddah, Ukraine said it would accept an immediate 30-day ceasefire with Russia. Europe seems caught off guard as the geopolitical glacial plates are shifting fast. When Russian President Vladimir Putin launched the invasion of Ukraine on February 24, 2022, he probably thought the war would be over within days. So did Ukraine's Western partners, including the United States, who vacated their embassies in Kyiv right before the war began. But when Ukraine denied a quick victory to the Russians, the West stepped in. The United States, under the Biden administration, adopted a two-pronged approach towards the war. Impose biting sanctions on Russia to weaken its war machinery and arm Ukraine to the teeth to fight the Russians on the battlefield. We want to see Russia weakened, said Biden's Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin in April 2022. This approach was relatively successful in the war's initial phase. By September 2022, Russian troops were forced to withdraw from the settlements they had captured in the Kharkiv Oblast in the northeast, and in November the same year, Russia pulled back forces from Kherson city and parts of Mykolaiv on the right bank of the Dnipro River in the south. But in between Russia's retreats from Kharkiv and Kherson, President Putin had doubled down on the war. He annexed 4 Ukrainian oblasts: Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. He also announced a partial mobilization of forces. The message from the Kremlin was clear. It was ready to fight a long war. On the economy front, Putin pivoted towards Asia, where the huge markets of China and India and others helped Moscow offset the impact of the sanctions. Where does the war stand today? In 2023, Russia gradually turned the tide of the war inch by bloody inch. It took Soledar in January and Bakhmut in May after a months-long campaign. In 2024, Russia expedited its battlefield advances by capturing Avdiivka in February and Ugledar in October. At no point since 2023 had Ukraine seemed capable of defeating the Russians and recapturing the lost territories. In June 2023, Ukraine launched a much-awaited counteroffensive with advanced weapons from the West, but it fizzled out in the face of Russia's dogged defense. In August 2024, Ukraine captured some 1,000 square kilometers of Russian territory in the Kursk region in a surprise attack aimed at mounting pressure on Russia's advancing troops in the east. But Russia refused to walk into the trap and pressed ahead with its offensive in the east, the soft belly of Ukraine's resistance. In 2024, Russian forces captured an estimated 4,168 square kilometers in both Ukraine and Kursk. In Jan 2025, Russian troops seized Novosilka and parts of Toretsk. They have also been trying to encircle Pokrovsk. Ukraine in recent months stepped up drone and missile attacks deep inside Russian territory as well as in the Black Sea, hurting Russia's security. But on the battlefield, it has been on the back foot for over 2 years. Now, turn to Trump's America. Trump had promised during his election campaign that he would bring the war to a quick end. After taking office in Jan, he moved fast. First, Pete Hegseth, the US Defense Secretary, told the Ukraine Defense Contact Group that Ukraine would not become a NATO member. He also ruled out American security guarantees for Ukraine and said any European guarantee would not be covered under NATO's collective security clause. Immediately after Hegseth's comment, Trump held a telephone conversation with President Putin. Within days, Russia and the United States had 2 rounds of bilateral talks. Trump seems pretty determined to reset America's ties with Russia. One explanation for this approach is that the United States doesn't see Russia as a threat anymore. The United States, in that sense, is breaking with the post-Second World War transatlantic consensus and is going back to the pre-First World War offshore balancing. In this realist worldview, China is the systemic threat the United States is facing, and a Sino-Russian alliance could make that threat more perilous. It would entail a reorientation of America's foreign policy towards Russia in a reverse order of what Henry Kissinger did in the 1970s when he and President Richard Nixon exploited the Sino-Soviet split and reached out to Beijing. In this grand reset plan, Ukraine is just a hindrance. Trump believes Ukraine can't win the war even with American support, and he wants Kyiv to take the deal the United States plans to make with Russia and end the war. Where does it leave Europe? Europe seems to be struggling as of now to come to terms with what's happening. When Ukraine was promised NATO membership by US President George W. Bush in 2008, Germany and France were hesitant. After Russia annexed Crimea in 2014 and supported a rebellion in Ukraine's east, Germany and France played a key role in negotiating the Minsk process to bring peace to Ukraine. But the United States was not very keen on the Minsk Accords, and it continued to back Ukraine militarily. No side, Kyiv, the separatists in the east, or Russia, implemented the accords. The crisis escalated into a full-blown war on Europe's watch in 2022. After the war began, Europe had to pay a huge economic cost. The Nord Stream pipeline linking Russia across the Baltic Sea to Germany was blown away, most likely by the Ukrainians if you believe American media reports. The stoppage of the flow of cheap Russian gas triggered a cost of living crisis and deindustrialization, which deepened public antipathy towards Europe's political establishment. For example, take the case of Germany. Germany is in a recession for the 3rd consecutive year, and the German far right, the AfD, is ascendant. And now, the United States, which was in the lead of the pro-Ukraine alliance, is breaking with the policy and directly talking to the Russians, excluding both Ukraine and Europe. European countries have called 2 summit-level meetings since Trump came to office and promised to do more to help Ukraine. But the question is whether Europe, which itself is divided, has the capacity to provide security guarantees to Ukraine without America's backing. At present, Europe doesn't have many options but to go with the American plan. Europe also has bigger problems than Ukraine. It is worried about the future of NATO as the Trump administration is reorienting America's post-war foreign and security policy. This leaves Ukraine in a spot. Ukraine has lost more than 20% of its territories to Russia, and tens of thousands of soldiers were killed in the war. Millions of Ukrainians have fled the country. Its economy is in shambles, and the energy sector is facing a major crisis because of Russia's repeated bombardment. The country is also dependent on external supplies to meet at least half of its weapons, including artillery and ammunition. Ukraine is also facing a manpower crunch on the battlefield. The United States says it is not practical to expect Ukraine to retake its lost territories. The US promised NATO membership to Ukraine in 2008, and now In 2025, the US says Ukraine can forget about NATO. Ukraine wants at least security guarantees, but America is non-committal on providing any such guarantee. So, if Ukraine continues the war, it could lose more territories. If it stops the war, it will have to do so on the terms set by Russia and the United States of America. In the outset, no good options are left for Mr. Zelenskyy and his generals. So finally, the Ukrainians decided to go with the American plan and announced their willingness to declare a ceasefire after the meeting in Saudi Arabia. Great powers fight proxy wars when their interests clash. Great powers reset ties when their interests align. The pawns and proxies suffer. Ukraine's story is not different. For more such videos, please subscribe to The Hindu.